Gerald Maya, right?
Anais, Maya, Gerald. Anais, Maya, Gerald. Okay, and we're live. This is Literary Roadhouse. One short story once a week. I'm Anais.
And Maya.
And I'm Gerald.
This week we're reading The Wig by Han Dong, a story featured in Granta magazine. In The Wig, Hu Jiangyang, a university professor, returns to class after the summer break wearing a new wig. Over the course of the year, he meticulously manages his wig so that no one can guess he is wearing a wig. He never takes it off anywhere he may be discovered, wears it in different styles, and even cuts it so that people will think it's his natural hair freshly cut. By the end of the academic year, his wig was worn through so badly that the net was almost showing through beneath the hair, as if you could see through a scalp to the neurons below. He quietly disposes of the wig.
Oh, Annie, that was such like an excellent summary. And at the same time, it doesn't even touch on what I got from the story. This story is a very simple story. But first, I want to say thank you for submitting this. This is really interesting. The idea of a contest for young translators. For our listeners, this story was published in English, but it originally is a Chinese story, and it was a contest winner. So every year they take a foreign language story and they let young translators translate the story, and whoever does the best translation wins. And I'm just fascinated by this concept, and I wish I could have read some of the non-winners, actually. But so let's just jump right in. What did you guys think on a cursory level? I already hinted that I liked it and got a lot out of it. How about you guys?
Go, Annie. I'm still thinking.
Okay. So Gerald's going to be our negative voice this week. That's great. Well,
I love it when he has the grumpy old man face because he so rarely gets it.
Well, and also it's good because I feel like I need a counterbalance because I mostly enjoyed this story. I would say I like it, but it's a bit of a head scratcher, but I like that I'm scratching my head about it. It feels appropriate for a story about wigs. You know, I'm like, okay. So I liked it, and I would recommend that people read, especially because it's so short. So I'm curious to see why Gerald didn't.
Yeah, I think I was still suffering from the news that Lincoln in the Bardo won the Man Booker Prize last night.
Oh my goodness, he's never going to let it
What?
go.
Gerald, I have not had internet.
It's all bad news.
You're kidding me, Gerald.
I kid you.
Annie's, tell me he's kidding. Lincoln in the Bardo won the Man Booker?
Yeah.
Listen, I liked it.
What were they smoking?
I liked it.
Screw you. It's people like you that are ruining literature.
Yeah. Anise, your fault.
It is my fault. I wrote in and I was like, guys, you need to do this just to upset Gerald and Maya.
That was just an obligatory
win.
Oh my God. I'm still going to get so much hate mail from this episode. Sorry, just send your hate mail to Maya at literaryroadhouse.com.
I liked it.
I know you liked it.
Just very quick. It is quite weird because I then started looking at reviews for it, and they said it's a challenging book. It's an interesting book. It's a unique concept.
Did anybody say it was good?
But there ain't no story to it. Well, there is, but it's incomprehensible. Anyway, enough of that.
There's a ghost with a giant boner. So listen, that's why.
You know what's sad, Eddie, is not only is he going off, this is the first I've heard of this, and I am now at the place where Gerald probably was last night.
Where I've been all day, actually, by the way. And it probably didn't help. It's in this mood that I read The Wig. Grumpy old man voice.
Wig story.
The wig. Yeah, it's. Yeah, I'm scratching my head now. I like. Okay, there are some things that you can get from the story, and it just doesn't. It just sort of starts at like midpoint and then goes downhill and just. And I thought, and so what?
Oh, Gerald, so tell us how you really feel.
I told.
Gerald, was it competently written?
It's kind of hard to tell with the translation. It's well, it's all right. You know, I don't think it was.
Okay, well, I'm going to play Annie's this episode, I guess. This is my Lincoln in the Bardo. I love the story. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I love the story is a couple reasons. First, I thought the translation was really interesting. I'm wondering if that's how the story was actually written, because there were certain things in the translation that I thought that's a really interesting artistic choice. And I want to know if it came from the author or the translator. That's the first thing. Second thing, this story is about so much more than this dude with a wig. He has a wig, but what does that wig symbolize? It symbolizes how he presents himself to the world, and then this wig becomes his prison that he has to upkeep. Now, if I'm, maybe because I'm on social media and I'm a YouTuber and I'm on Instagram and shit, I see this all the time. I see this common issue in our culture right now of people having this facade of what they think they have to do and how they want to appear to the world, and eventually that facade becomes their prison. You see it in Instagrammers that have all the pretty pictures all the time, and then like they have a bad day and all of a sudden everyone comes at them saying that they're fake or they're frauds because they had a bad day. You are not allowed to have a bad day anymore. You always have to look perfect, but you have to look perfect in a way that looks like you're naturally perfect. And I think that this story has a lot of social commentary about these topics. I like the fact that the social commentary isn't like blatant. You know, he's not going to the fields of New England after the death of his mother. Like this is like there's a subtext here, but also the subtext I found was a humorous subtext, because so many things that he does is ludicrous because it's. But when you take it away from the wig, you realize we do that kind of stuff all the time. And it starts to make you realize how ludicrous our lives are in and of themselves. So I love this story. I loved what the story did. There were a couple points where I laughed. It was brilliant to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so now, Gerald, tell me why I'm stupid, uneducated, need to go back to school, preferably a not U.S. school.
I would never do that. This is an opinion podcast. All welcome to them, even when they're wrong. Go on. Yeah, I think you're right. You can get there's not a lot out of it. You can get a reasonable amount out of it, and there is this sort of social commentary about appearance and how you become imprisoned by maintaining this appearance constantly. So I got that.
And he doesn't care.
No, I don't care.
So I think, yeah, what I liked about it is like the story focuses, the way that the story is told, he never gets into the inner world of this character. So you're seeing this world very external, which is appropriate for a story about how this person expresses himself externally. So there's this way in which it's really effective, because I feel like I both understand him and I don't. There's something so utterly ridiculous about him, and also yet in his ridiculousness, it's the way that he's expressing something that feels innately human. This need to be presented in a certain way. It's the cinema scene actually is what struck me the most, because in 3 paragraphs, he very quickly goes from paragraph 1, everyone's admiring me, everyone thinks no one is noticing me. Paragraph 3, I am ridiculous and uncomfortable. And I'm like, yes, I understand this. Like, there's just something where there's an interview with the author Han Dong that Granta did, where he said a line that stuck to me. He said there's a Chinese saying that you smile when you see through someone. And I feel like this story is that saying. I'm smiling because I'm seeing through this guy. I'm like, I see you. I know you. What you're doing feels ridiculous, but the reason you're doing it doesn't. And I think that's why I liked it. It just felt very human without having to beat me over the head with it.
Yeah, it did. There were parts where it felt very revealing in a way that almost made me uncomfortable for the character. Like the moment that stuck out for me was when he does have a girlfriend, and the girlfriend doesn't care about the way. Like, she just doesn't care, because, you know, like, why would you care? And then, like, he said something about her tiny breasts, and all of a sudden she calls him a bald man. And it strikes him to the core, like, in like this really like vulnerable area, this vulnerable spot. Whereas he had no like qualms about like saying that her breasts were too small, but the minute she calls him a bald man, it's like he's emotionally crushed and devastated. I found that very realistic and wonderful.
Yeah, I quite. It's the bit that I made me laugh. You won't be surprised. Is the bit where they said that he equated the time when he could take his wig off and let his head breathe, to the times when a man would masturbate, and I
That was so good.
and he explained this to his girlfriend. No.
The thing was, the Pavlovian response totally made sense, but it was so ridiculous and so brilliant. Yeah. Because when you're writing a short story, a lot of times when you have these really crazy off the wall ideas, you think, oh yeah, that can't work. I'm just being nutsy. I'm just gonna have to cut that out. This story doesn't cut that stuff out. And it's brilliant for it. The whole equating, taking off the wig to masturbation, I thought was brilliant. And I spent 3 years wearing wigs every single night for work for 8 to 16 hours. And the way he described the itch of the wig and the weight, and at first feeling light and feeling beautiful, and then over the night it gets heavier and heavier, and it feels like it's itching, and its follicles are gonna like dig into your scalp. Like, that was real to me. I was like, oh man, I hate my wig again. I felt like I was wearing it again. So yeah, I thought it was brilliant in that respect.
Mm-hmm. It was really short though, so I feel like all I really have to say is like this. It just, to me, it's like a really kind of clever, the way that it's told, with the focusing on the external. It's just funny character portrait of something that's just like, yep, that's really human. It makes me think about like when I try to do something different just to mix it up, how I present myself, and I spend the whole night like worrying about, because I'm not, like, for example, a few nights ago I was like, I never show off any chest. Like, that's just, I tend to dress pretty modestly. And I wore a shirt that like was low cut. I went to a restaurant with a girlfriend of mine.
All night, you're just like,
all night I'm just like, because it felt so uncomfortable. So I think him and the cinema stood out for me for that reason, because it was me in the restaurant.
Yeah, exactly. Well, one of the things that I want to ask you guys, because we've been doing this for 2 years. We've been reading stories. A lot of them have been Western stories, but we've really made a point to try to read diversely for this podcast. And I'm thinking back to a lot of the stories that we've read from different parts of Asia and the differences in American stories. Like, as I was reading this, it felt very much like an Asian story. But the writing, I don't know whether it's the writing or the translating, felt very Westernized and didn't stand out as foreign in any way. So there was something in the structure that I felt was quintessentially Chinese literature. And I'm trying to figure out what that is. There's a certain level of distance. Like, if an American had written the story, I feel like they probably would have written it much closer point of view to the character. I feel like a lot of times in Asian literature, there's like a step back so that you're watching the characters from more of a distance. It's almost more of like an old-fashioned omniscient point of view, but not really. Like, you're still in his point of view, or really close third person. But it feels like there's more distance. And in that pulling back, it's almost like getting a bigger screen, getting a bigger lens and pulling it back, and you see more of the big picture. And I see that a lot in Asian literature. I'm thinking back to Delira, our funniest episode that we've ever recorded. For listeners that may have missed that, highly recommend it. But also I'm thinking to some stories that I've been reading lately that I haven't been reading for the podcast that are coming out of Japan and China. You know, there's something about the story, and I'm starting to wonder, as far as regional flavor for short stories, I'm starting to pick out these little things, like, what is it about a South African story that makes it feel like it's South African? You know what I mean? What is it about this story that makes it feel like it's a Chinese, like it's an Asian story versus any other story that we would read?
I think one thing, I mean, it's an interesting question, an interesting idea that story nationality or region can be recognized. And one of the things I think is that there's a traditional English/American stories seem to be more constrained. The ones we read from South American authors and from Eastern authors seem to have freedom to be more absurd and more crackpot and crazy ideas. And I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but I just think it's like they're not afraid to push, not just push the boundaries, but break the boundaries and say, I'm going to write a story like this, and I'm going to do this, and here it is. And I'm sure I get that feeling from, particularly from sort of Chinese, Japanese authors.
Yeah, I think I used to get that feeling a lot from Latin American authors, but now it seems like that freedom has been codified into magical realism or whatever they want to call it, and so now it has rules. I think this idea of is coming from other cultures and being published in English really highlights the differences. Like, you're right. I feel like a lot of times American short story writers, myself included, I feel like this is what a short story is. These are the rules involved in order to be taken seriously. I have to follow those rules. You know, in order to get it into a journal, it has to like tick off all these boxes. And I feel like there's this lovely freedom to play with ideas and words in other countries, especially a place like South Africa, where there's a lot of writers, but their publishing industry isn't mature, and it's really hard for South African writers to get published. And so there's this freedom in that. The rules are codified.
Going back to the interview that Han Dong did with Granta, and if there's a reader who's like interested in this question, then I highly recommend this interview, because he talks about how he's inspired by the Qing and Min dynasty story structures, which are very mature and very rigid and don't actually allow for a lot of self-expression. The author doesn't really have flourishes, and if you notice, the story doesn't have that many flourishes as well, which is something that as a modern author he says he does see as a limit. But one of the things that it would force Chinese authors to do was to, within that very strict and mature story structure, try to get play within that to get the most clever narrative or the plot. Like, I feel like in the end, when it's like, and then he gets rid of the wig, there's a little bit of like it gets a little smile from you, and how within these constraints you get this you still are able to have an effect on the reader. And I think some of that, because he's read a lot of that and that's what he studied and he seems to be a scholar of that, is influencing the story as well. And hearing him talk about it in the interview was really fascinating. It's a good interview.
I think that is fascinating. You know, I've talked to a lot of poets. When I went to Napa Writers Conference, all of the best poets that were there who did a lot of modern poetry, on the side, they did a lot of structured, like heavily structured poetry. They were doing sonnets just to work word practice and things like that, because they said that the more they practiced within structures, the more they were able to express themselves more freely outside, even within or outside those structures. So I find that interesting, that it sounds like he's doing something similar, but at the same time, it's like American structures are really like, you know, we know what literary fiction is. We know what MFA voice is. We know how to attract an editor's eye. So our codified structures aren't so much like, you know, structures. It's more like, this is the kind of writer you have to be taken seriously. And what I see in this is there are certain parts of the story that feel very playful, that feel very risk-taking, that I don't know if an American author would have taken those same risks. At the risk of feeling like they would be appearing to be ludicrous or not taking their art seriously, which in and of itself makes this story a very serious artistic story to me. It's like equating taking off his wig with masturbation, because the only time you can take off his wig is someplace super private. I mean, that's something that I can think of maybe one, maybe two American authors that might take a risk like that. You know, it's just such a ludicrous thing to put in a story. But it works, and it works beautifully.
And another risk he takes is making the character unlikable with really no redeeming qualities. Normally, when you have an unlikable character, there's always like one or two things you can hold on to. And in this case, you can't. And it's fine. It still works somehow. It's still like, he's not likable, but I think
Guy hasn't read Save the Cat.
I think it's ridiculous. It's just like it's the whole you smile when you see through someone. It's the fact that we're seeing through him, I think, that helps it. You don't get bogged down with his unlikability. You just sort of get bogged down more with his eccentricities and his neuroses. With that last line, that you can see through to his neurons. you know, it's a little bit like good job looking at his neuroses. Here's a little like nod to that.
Yeah. You know, one of the things when I look at the story as I was reading it, I mean, in Gerald's defense, you know, because, you know, it's very hard to be brilliant, you know. In Gerald's defense, as I was reading it, and I was like, there's not a lot here. Why am I enjoying this? You know, I kept having this come up, but yet I kept wanting to read. And at the end, I really didn't want it to end. I was like, oh, it was too short. But I was like, why am I having this emotional response to the story that's so simple on its face? It doesn't really have a lot there. And so then I started thinking, is this story missing anything? For me, it isn't. Like, that's always like when I start to even think, when I start to inch towards the 6, I'm like, well, is it missing anything? And I feel like the language is perfect for this story. Any more characterization would have taken away. Any less characterization would have taken away. I feel like the idea is amazingly brilliant because you can either read it on its face value about a man with a wig, or you can get into it with all of this cultural resonance that we're dealing with right now. You can really read the story as deeply as you want to. And it's a really short story that took me probably 15 minutes to read, and it's 12:38 right now, and we're still talking about it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, to me, story.
Yeah. I don't think it would have worked being longer. I think part of the reason that you're sort of giving it a pass is that it is because it's so short. So that
did you just say I'm giving it a pass, Gerald? You just itch that in there like I'm not going to notice.
Did I say that? Oh, sorry. I thought I was thinking it. Maybe part of the. I mean, yeah, the character doesn't make it, and it's okay, but it wouldn't be okay if the character was part of us story. I think you'd say, well, come on, give us some light and shade, give us something to admire or enjoy about him. So yeah, I think because it is just 1,400 words or something, I think it can get away with sort of things that we would normally criticize on a longer piece.
See, I think the opposite. For me, the shorter the story, the more critical I get. A lot of longer stories get away with a lot of bloat because they can have all these flourishes of language. They can have all these flourishes of characterization. This story is, like you said, it's 1,400 words, and it probably feels a little shorter than that. There isn't a whole lot of room for characterization, yet I feel like I know this man. There isn't a whole lot of room for flourishes, yet there were multiple points in the story where I was like, wow, that was an amazing word choice. I wonder if that was the writer or the translator. You know, I feel like there was a lot done with a little amount of space, and I'm judging it pretty harshly.
Okay.
Stories, I tend to. I expect a lot. If you're going to write super short, you have like a sentence to tell me who this character is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I will say to what Gerald, one of the first things Gerald said on the podcast was, so what? And that is a question that I couldn't answer. So if you're the kind of reader who needs the answer to the so what, maybe the story, you're not going to get it here. It's a little bit like, and you're right. It's because of the length. If I read a full novel and at the end of the novel said, so what? I would not be as forgiving. This is true. Except I guess Lincoln in the Bardo. No, Lincoln in the Bardo has a so what. It does.
We're not going to talk Lincoln in the Bardo because I want to still like you at the end of this podcast anyways. Yeah. What I will say as far as the so what is the story itself, it won't answer the so what. Because for me, the so what was really obvious. I will say that this is a story that the reader has to step up and bring as much to the plate as the writer does. There are certain stories, I forget who it was I was listening to. I was listening to some audiobook about writing and Patricia Highsmith and some reader who was talking about, this difference between writers who feel like, no, it wasn't a writer, it was a painter, the dude with the urinals. And he believed that art was made not when the artist finished the piece, but when the when the patrons saw it, that art was an interplay between the artist and the viewer. And I feel like this story is a perfect example of that. If you come to the story and expect the story to just give you everything, you're not going to get a whole lot out of it. You really need to bring something to the table and really think about what the story is talking about in order to reveal the art of the piece.
Yep. And that's actually something that the author Han Dong says in the interview. He says because he respects the reader, he doesn't want to hand stuff to them. Yeah, you would love the interview. It's like right up your alley. It's like
I really would. He sounds like he's totally right up my alley.
Yep.
Really
and
right
he
up my
says the
alley.
same thing. He says exactly that he doesn't want to, that he respects the reader a lot, and that's why he knows it's a little dense, or he expects the reader to do some work on their part to get something out of the story. But I didn't jump to the social media thing. I don't know why. I mean, I think the social media thing is true. I'm not saying that's a great.
I mean, it's not just social media; it's everything. Like right now, people, this lack of intimacy between people, and I don't know if it's the same where you're at, but in the U.S., it's gotten pretty bad. Where it's like when you go see your neighbor, you want to present yourself a certain way. If you're going to the grocery store, you have to present yourself a certain way, and there's this level of facade that's become really common. That is just, social media is like the best example of it because it's just so freaking ridiculous and extreme. You know, like I was talking to somebody about van life Instagram photos, and you see this van life couple where the van looks huge and spacious, and the van is really like 13 square feet, but they're taking these photos with fisheye lenses and they're overlooking the ocean, and the girl's in a bikini all the time, but that's not their real life, but they're presenting it as if it's their real life. So then if you see them in the grocery store and they're in sweats and no makeup on, then they feel self-conscious because that's not their image.
Yeah.
Yep.
Are we going to rate this puppy, or is there anything else that we want to talk about?
I'm good to rate.
No.
Okay, I'm going to just flat out say it. I'm giving it a 6. The more I've talked about it, the more I liked it. I know, deal with it, Gerald. It's getting a 6 from me. Anais, make sure you capture his mutterings. I do want that mixtape of Gerald's mutterings. Please. Someday. Just a whole mixtape of just him just chewing me out under his breath. I need it in my life.
Gerald, what are you giving it?
I'm giving it a 3 because it does have that social commentary on appearance and how it, you know, how it ends up controlling you rather than you controlling it. Yeah.
Okay. I've connected you.
It's actually higher than I thought he would give it.
Yeah, I think your 6 made him come up half a point.
No, he didn't.
No.
yeah, I fully thought he was going to be in the 2s.
Well,
No.
I have connected prophesied myself into a 5. I think it's really good, but there's so many other stories. We've read so many, and there's so many more that by the end of it, I was just much more jazzed. And it's true. Yeah. This story, when I finished reading it, I had a bit of like I'm smiling and I don't know why, and I had to think about it to get there. So the author did succeed in making me work for it, which is fine. Absolutely. But still, even after working through it, there's still something that doesn't quite make me want to like jump for the moon. So, yeah.
Very good.
Okay. So it's time for the game to choose next week's story. What are you guys submitting?
I'm submitting because I swear we're going to read this story if it kills me. This is the 2017 winner of the Kane Prize for African Writing. It's the story of The Girl Whose Birds Flew Away by Bushra Al-Fadil.
Okay.
Well, sorry, because I came to this fairly in a bit of a rush. I got it, my old favourite Carve magazine. But I quite like the look of this story. It's called Laughing and Turning Away by Patrick Holloway.
Okay. So we're going to do a quiz. There's no way you're going to predict that it's a quiz about wigs.
About?
Wigs.
No.
What did you think it would be?
I would never have thought that.
Never.
No,
okay. So it's only 6 questions and a tiebreaker. And it's multiple choice. A classic literary Roadhouse game. Gerald's first on my screen. Did Maya freeze? She hasn't moved in a while.
Yeah, she's frozen for me. Although she did freeze before but came back. Yeah, but she's not coming back this time. We'll just give her a moment.
Yeah.
This is one of those bits to cut out, isn't it?
Yes, and you're gonna get good at that maybe if you decide to do this. You don't have to. If you don't want to.
No, I don't. I want to help out. I don't want to take on the whole responsibility because it sounded quite weighty. But no, I'll be. I mean, doing what you suggested of you, syncing and whatnot. Yeah, I can go through it and cut out all the bits I don't like.
Cool. Yep. Oh, there's some times where you're going to cut things just to make someone else sound smarter. That has happened. Where I'm like,
Yeah.
You didn't want to say that. You didn't. No. It's out.
I'll cut that out. Yes.
Yeah. Or too much repetition. Sometimes we'll make the same point 5 times.
Yeah.
Hopefully she'll come back, or else I guess you get it.
Oh, hey. We've got to ask the questions.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. And muted.
Sorry about that. The internet went down for a minute. Hey, it was a good cut point.
Yeah, it was.
A perfect cut point.
Okay, so wig. Oh, Gerald, did you say your story? You did, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, we both said our stories.
Yes.
I got nothing after that.
Okay, so quiz about wigs, 6 stories with a tiebreaker if we need it, multiple choice. In the order goes Gerald and Maya. So Gerald,
go.
The word wig is short for periwig, which is a wig worn by judges and aristocrats. When did the word wig first come to be used in the English language? 1575, 1675, 1775, 1875. So pick a century.
1875.
Nope, it was
Really?
1675.
Yeah, that was a pretty late guess.
Well, he just thought it was periwigs. Okay.
Yeah.
Maya, the most expensive wig ever auctioned off belonged to, was it Yoko Ono, Ringo Starr, Andy Warhol, or Mick Jagger?
Ooh, re-say those names.
Yoko Ono, Ringo Starr, Andy Warhol, Mick Jagger.
It's not going to be Rick Jagger. It's going to be... Oh. I feel like I should say Ringo Starr, but I'm going to say Andy Warhol.
It is Andy Warhol. Good job. It sold for $10,800. Okay, Gerald.
Go.
In the movie Mean Girls, one of the Mean Girls wore a wig. Was it Regina, Gretchen, Karen, Katie?
Gretchen.
Nope, it was Regina. Okay, Maya. Which movie made the most wigs in production? Was it The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, Amadeus, the Mozart movie from the 80s, Avatar, or Shakespeare in Love?
What was the first choice?
The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers.
I'll tell you what, I should be in there this afternoon.
I'm going to say it was Amadeus.
Nope, it was Lord of the Rings. I think because of the elves. Okay.
I almost chose Lord of the Rings. I was so close.
Yeah. I know. I put in Amadeus because I knew it would be tempting.
You're good about
my
that.
research. Yeah. And in doing my research, apparently Mozart had a left ear deformity that he would always hide with his wig. The real Mozart. Fascinating. Okay. Gerald. Yeah. When was the flesh-colored hairnet for wigs invented? Was it 1605, 1705, 1805, 1905?
Ooh, that's rough.
1705.
Nope, 1805.
Oh.
So Maya's got this, but I'll just do the last question because it's kind of fun. How did the ancient Egyptians secure their wigs on their heads? Was it flesh-colored loops that hung around the ears? They tied it into their real hair, clay mixed with tree sap, or beeswax and animal fat?
Are we both saying?
No, it's just you. You already won. It's just for fun.
Oh, I think it's beeswax and animal fat.
It is. Good job.
Yeah, I remember
So-
they put perfume on it and it would like stick and be gross and nasty. And
So Maya, what are we reading?
Oh, good question, because like my computer shut down and it shut down that page. We are reading this really one note. Next week, we are reading The Story of the Girl Whose Birds Flew Away by Bushra Afidil.
Okay. But before you go, tell us your physical insecurities and thoughts on the story in the comments section at literaryroadhouse.com. Or hey, let's reclaim the glory of the wig. Tweet your favorite wigs to us on Twitter at Lit Roadhouse. Craving more humorous character studies? Join the Literary Roadhouse Book Club, a monthly show that discusses full fiction novels. And finally, our podcast is going bald. Help us buy a podcast wig by contributing at patreon.com/Literary Roadhouse. Every bit helps. And as always, share this podcast with the balding professor in your life. Until next time, read a good story.
Oh, your outros.